Hey, what's going on, Adobe Live? Welcome back, students. Welcome in the chat. Howdy, how are you doing? Let us know where you're calling in from. I see some of you guys are definitely students from Springboard. We're glad that you're here. But guess what? This is episode 2 of Real Talk. We have an amazing guest today. I'm super excited to have him here with us. And without any further ado, I can only steal so much thunder from him. He is an amazing data scientist. He is in the sports analytics game. He is an amazing data scientist, educator, and content creator with an audience of over 167, probably more, plus on the YouTube platform, and he's got an amazing podcast as well. Today, we're going to talk with him about how he got started on his journey, where he is today, and answer any and all of the questions that you guys have in the chat on where and how to improve in your data science career. So with that said, please introduce, or help me introduce, Ken G to the stage. Let's go. What's happening, my friend? How you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
For sure, man. Well, first off, guys, it's morning for Ken. I know he wakes up super early in the morning, and I know I wake up at 9. I'm like, ugh, just trying to go for a run in the morning. But yeah, Ken. So because I don't want to tell everybody your story, give us a little bit of background for those who are in the chat. Who you are, a little bit of your background, and how you kind of arrived to where you are at today, and where that is exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So a little background on me. So my main role, I'm the head of data science at a company called Scouts Consulting Group. So our mission there is to help athletes and teams improve their performance by analyzing the data that's collected on them. So we're exclusively focused on the performance analytics, helping individuals and teams win. That to me is a little bit of a unique space. And it's something that honestly, I had no clue how to break into. I had no previous knowledge of how to do it until I was already doing it, which I think is kind of funny. So my data science journey, it actually started in sports to begin with. I played
Mm.
baseball in high school. I was looking to play that in college. I ended up injuring myself, and I ended up playing golf in college. And throughout my entire high school and most of my college career, I was a terrible student. All I wanted to do was play better golf. I wanted to improve my performance. And eventually, I took a statistics course and I settled on an economics major. And the first courses that I took within those domains, uh, like a switch flipped. And I realized
Mm.
that I could use math, I could use graphical data, I could use trends, I could use standard deviation, uh, like marginal return on performance to improve my golf game. And this just lit an absolute fire under me. I started collecting all of my data when I was playing. I started looking again at the marginal return on investment of focusing and practicing on one area of my golf game versus another. And this
Right.
opened up the entire world to me. I realized that there was power in math, there was power in like viewing the world in this different way. And I started to really pull on that thread more. So if I fast forward till after college, I tried to play professional golf and I had fun, but I realized, partly from my economics courses, what a sunk cost was. So I saw that, wow, I probably am not going to be able to succeed here unless I spend an inordinate amount of time and money and whatever it might be. There's probably a better use of my time. And so around this
Mm.
time, as I was interested in my own performance, I started to get interested in understanding the performance in the professional sphere. So I started playing a lot of daily fantasy sports and regular fantasy sports, and I wanted to solve this problem of predicting what was going to happen in future sporting events. So I went down this giant rabbit hole trying to do that, which was fundamentally different from what I was doing analyzing my own game before. So I started to realize, hey, I need a different skill set. I need to learn a bit more math. I have to understand linear regression. I have to understand the different models that are out there, perhaps random forests, support vector machines, maybe even explore some deep learning techniques to predict these things. And the more I realized how much the more I got into this problem, one, the more skills I started to accumulate related to the data science machine learning domain, and two, the more I realized that, wow, there's a long way to go. There's a lot to learn in this field. So I did just that. I took an internship at DraftKings, actually, where I was
Oh,
working in some
word.
analytics, and I got exposure to a lot of the tools they were using. Like at this point in time, I didn't know what a SQL was. I didn't
Yeah.
know how to write a single line of code. I was doing everything in Excel. And that even kind of blew the cap off of my mind there, is that there's a lot more to this. I want to go and learn this. So I went back to school. I got a master's in, it's like a global business degree from Virginia. There, I did learn some SQL. I learned a lot more advanced math, but I was still pretty deficient in the coding sphere. So I took a little hiatus from this. I worked in management consulting for a little while, and then I just really fell in love again with the sports analytics. I said, this is what I want to do. And so I went back and I got my master's in computer science. And so going down that journey, I learned a lot about the coding. I went sort of the opposite direction. A lot of people kind of slowly
Yeah.
merge in. I was on the business side. I like jumped pure technical and tried to work my way back towards the middle. Um, not to go on a tangent, but back then, that was the only viable path that I saw for learning the skills that I needed. Right, there wasn't an abundance of incredible resources that are out there now. I'm a firm believer that now, whether it's boot camps, whether it's certificates, whether it's YouTube, whether it's just blog articles or finding a really incredible GitHub repo, there's a ton of opportunities to learn these same skills that I didn't have access to. There's no reason I should have spent as much money as I did on education to learn this stuff as I did back then. But circling back, what I found was that I kept chasing questions, and by being fascinated with those questions, I started to develop this skill set. Because in order to
Mm.
answer more of the questions related to sports, I had to pick up more skills. I had to learn to code. I had to do all of these different things. And eventually, a lot of that work that I did, doing projects, trying to building models, predicting these things, they led me into the work that I do now. So I
Yeah.
was talking with a couple friends. They had created this really incredible business case to pitch the U.S. Ryder Cup team around. Essentially, the U.S. Ryder Cup team is a golf event. The top players in the U.S. play the top players in Europe, and the U.S. has lost it was 9 of the last 11 events, when on paper they had a significantly better team. And so we had this incredible business case, and I said, wow, I have this skill set for analyzing sports data. And I hooked in with them, and ended up winning this contract, and that's led to more contracts. That's led to other things, and that's really how all this started. Is this intense passion for wanting to understand this domain and my own performance better, which evolved into a love of this field, a really genuine interest in the techniques. I wouldn't say I love coding every day, but I love the
Yeah.
problems that these tools allow me to solve. So, long story short, I got obsessed with the problem, and I really dug my heels in and learned everything I could about trying to predict and solve and understand.
I love it, man. That's a great way to actually just like pause and then transition. I hope you get. There's a lot of people in the chat saying, "Oh my God, it's the Kenster." They didn't say the Kenster, but you have a lot of fans in here. So glad you
Excellent.
guys are excited to have Ken with us today.
Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, we got the fan here, the fans out here. All right, so with
Heck
that
yeah.
said, let's talk about, because there's a lot of different things that we can actually dive into what you kind of beautifully laid out for us. When you started, and you like some of your best content, performing content out there is literally how, if you were to start data science or learning data science again, whether it's your 66 days of data, or starting back from zero and teaching forward. For the students in the audience, or really anybody that's watching interested in getting into data science, what are those things that are important for people to focus on? Whether it's skills, resources, types of knowledge, and where to kind of get those, if we can just focus on answering that in particular.
For sure. I think there's one thing that I really want to make clear, is that there's no one size fits all approach to learn this domain. The most important thing that you can do is to get started somewhere and just dig
Mm.
in and create a space where you're working and you know what to do. Like certificates, courses, boot camps, that's an incredible place to say, hey, you start here and you end here. A lot of people, when they're getting into data science, their biggest challenge is, oh, where do I start? There's so much in this field. Honestly, it doesn't really matter where you start. You're going to learn most of it eventually, right? Like if I start
Yeah.
over here, if I start over here, I'm eventually going to encompass all of that thing. So getting past that initial phase of doubt and overwhelm associated with the volume of information, and just just as I did. I found a thread and I pulled on it, and I kept pulling on it, kept pulling on it, and eventually this whole domain of analytics started to open up to me. That's a big one. I personally, if I were to do it again, I always enjoy starting with the coding. Like if you learn
Mm.
Python, if you learn R, I prefer Python. I find that um, I can apply everything that I'm learning. So if I'm learning a math concept, right?
Yeah.
Understanding Python allows me to translate that math concept into code, and it allows me to experiment with it, right? I can create a distribution. I can cut the distribution in these different ways using programming. I can do that with a pen and paper too, but to me, just having that toolkit to be able to again translate this math into something that I'm using on a more regular basis as a data scientist is a very powerful thing. I will say I think the math, the foundations, the statistics, all these things are incredibly important, and you need
Yeah.
to learn them to have a career in this field. But I have just personally found that if I go the coding route and the application route, I understand the math concepts better. Right? Again, if I have to implement something in code, I understand the inner workings a little bit better, and that eventually gives me some stickiness to put the theorem and attach the theory to that model of the world I've already created, that actionable thing that I can tinker with. This sort of hands-on approach to me has been the most successful. Again, if that's not how you think, if you love the math, if you love the theory, if you love the statistics, that's totally fine. You can start there and then eventually integrate the other way. But I have, again, personally found the most success, and I'd say the majority of people find that like the hands-on approach of coding first is just a little bit easier for them. But again,
Mm.
that varies tremendously. I've through my podcast Ken's Nearest Neighbors, I've talked with over 70 different data scientists, machine learning engineers, people within this domain, and the one common strain that everyone shared is that basically no one broke into the field in the same way. Oh, it's some of them learned the tools in a similar way, but there's people who just completely self-studied. There's PhDs. There's people who came from finance or
Yeah.
biology or even theater. Right? They all broke into this field. They all learned their skills in essentially pretty different ways. And to me, that's something that's really powerful. You have to be introspective, you have to find what works for you. And then you have to, again, go out and do that. Start somewhere. Like the most important thing, I will stress this again, is to start.
I agree, man. In this, I think this is just the technology world in general. There's so many different stacks to solve so many different problems. It's really, when somebody asks like a simple question of like, where do I start? It's like, well, where would you like to end up? And so, how for somebody who like pretend I'm somebody asking that question, how would actually, let's talk a little bit about your podcast, and I'm going to try to not go too deep. Like, from all those people that you've talked to, I'm very sure their stacks of knowledge are very different. And, for the people who are here, and actually, guys in the chat, let us know. Are you guys students? Are some of you you're curious about data science? Have you not even touched it yet? Let us know where you are so we can kind of contextualize the conversation a little bit. But for somebody who doesn't necessarily even know like the languages or what coding is or whatnot, how would you help them to start that journey? Start somewhere. Like, what would they learn first? Would they dive into a language? What are they diving into first?
Yeah, I almost always recommend that people look at Kaggle first. So Kaggle is the probably the best resource for data science on the entire internet. They have a bunch of
Mm,
free data sets. They have a bunch of free like micro courses. Like the micro courses aren't going to turn you into a data scientist after taking them, but it's enough to get
yeah.
started. Right? You learn the foundations of programming, the foundations of math, how to implement these things, and it's enough to get you started working on your own projects. To the kind of earlier question you alluded to, like how do you choose a resource when there are so many? Like first,
Yeah.
I think that it's incredible that there are so many really great resources out there. To me, that is like a powerful thing. It shows that like each learning resource is going to be a little different because of who
Mm-hmm.
is teaching it. And I really
Right.
recommend that people find teachers that they resonate with. Like the goal for the early stages is to just stick with it long enough so it becomes a habit, or it becomes something that is just what you do, not something that you're actively trying to do, right? You have to, like, it's like, oh, I want to learn for an hour a day. That's something I just do every day, and it becomes routine.
Right.
So I tell people, like, I have a course on how to break into the field, right? If you don't like how I talk, if you don't like seeing me when you turn on the screen, like don't buy my course. It doesn't make sense. There's plenty of other ones out there. If you learn better from like a written medium, like totally
Mm.
fine. There's great GitHub repos out there that you can go through and are tutorial style step by step, right? It
Yeah.
it it just go with what you like in the early stages. If you find a instructor that, hey, almost every online resource has a little free content and you can get a feel for it, like check it out. Like,
Yeah.
maybe spend 2 weeks deciding what resource you're going to look into, but set a hard time cap to it. Like read the reviews, talk to people who have taken it, do those types of things, and then just pull the trigger. Like say, hey, I like this one. It seems like it's going to be a good fit for me. I can, like I don't, the this guy's hair doesn't bother me. It's not triggering me. Like great, sure. Like go straight into it. To me, that's
Word.
something uh, that I think people put just way too much focus on choosing the right resource
Mm.
when, you know, just because you take one course doesn't mean you don't take another course. I've taken probably 3 or 4 different courses, online certificates, whatever it is, on the exact same material
Yeah.
because all 3 of those courses explained it in a different way. It was great, right? I learned the same thing, but I was like, hey, in this one resource, this really resonated with me how they described it. And this other one, this other algorithm, they explained it better, I think, right?
Yeah.
And you don't just like go in and learn this once. You have to continually reinforce this knowledge, and it is additive,
Yep.
not it doesn't replace. It's not substantive.
Yeah, it's like small little pieces of the puzzle. Like you're learning in one sector. They might, you're working on what they said they're working on, but they're gonna have like connections to other things that maybe another course or even what you're gonna go out and learn by yourself. And it's super important to just in general, not just stick with one train of thought, but like start learning multiple like different parallel uh, just training yourself. We were talking about jujitsu earlier. I know this is not necessarily the same thing, but like you can learn a move, and you know, there's a million different ways to get to the same place, whether it be a position or what have you. So it's kind of the same thinking when it comes to if coding or in data science. There's multiple ways in different stacks of knowledge to get you to the same and or different result. So I actually wanted to dive into because you're also an educator at a university. I wanted to know kind of how that is with your online education versus teaching. And do you teach in person, by the way,
Uh, I
or
started
did?
teaching last year, and I've only
Yeah,
done online education at this point. So the course
yeah,
that I teach is called Designing Ethical AI Systems at DePaul,
yeah.
and it was a lot of fun. It was mostly design students, and the focus is on giving them an introduction to data science and thinking about how they would integrate the design knowledge, like the human-centered design specifically, into an AI pipeline. Like where you're getting user feedback, like all of those
Mm,
different things. I learned a lot about design. It was actually a very incredible experience for me. I will say that I honestly prefer the scale of the education that I do on YouTube and on Udemy or wherever it is. To me, I can reach so many more people. And
yeah,
I didn't feel, I mean, I know all my students' names and things like that, but I didn't feel like I had necessarily a better connection with them than the people that learn my content online. I've met some incredible friends online. I've been able to, in a sense, mentor a lot of people in that space. And to me,
mm,
it's great that I can, with zero additional effort on my part, reach so many more people and potentially help them. Because frankly, a lot of the stuff that I'm showing on YouTube and on these platforms, it's not rocket science, right? You don't need that
yeah,
like super extra personalized touch. It's just, hey, this is something that you're learning from my experience, and you're able to integrate that. Of course, I'll answer questions and comments, but it's not like it's not like there's so much crazy fine granular nuance that that you might find in a university setting.
Yeah, and things just move so quickly nowadays, man. Where it's like old school traditional. It's awesome that even some of the traditional schooling, they're bringing in people like yourself who are doing online education and bringing in to even have control over some of the course curriculum. That's what Springboard does. They have some really amazing individuals come in and help tailor the coursework. And I think that we're in a space right now where, because of the internet and just how technology is going, we're in like I'm almost in the spot where I feel like I can't keep up, and I'm still looking young. You know what I'm saying? We're both out here with nice hair, but it is very challenging with things moving so quickly in a marketplace. For the areas in which the next generation or even people to keep up with the market is very important for us to be able to have new whether just education that also keeps up to keep us sharp. So with that said, I wanted to actually, because I did want to touch on this, kind of jumping back and forth, because we do have students in upcoming cohorts in the chat here. Can we talk about interviews? I know with your students, it's probably like and I'm sure most definitely it's something that you probably talk about on your channel as just as much as hopefully we'll be able to talk about here. But what are some things that you stress or want to kind of insert a seed into the people that you're mentoring in their mind? What do you think are some of the top 3 things people should know when it comes to data science interviews, or how to be prepared rather?
I think the first thing is how to get the interview to begin with. So I have a really good friend. His name is Jeff Lee. He's a senior data scientist at Spotify, right? And he during the pandemic landed 7 different offers from all like FANG big tech companies, whatever it is. And he did something pretty incredible where he approached applying for interviews very much like a data scientist. Tracked all of his information, tracked his success rates, looked at all these things. And he actually did this in his first application process when he was applying to entry-level data science jobs as well. And what he found was pretty incredible. So the first thing he found is that the medium in which he applied to these jobs, his success rate changed dramatically when he was when he was a senior data, or like a more senior data scientist, from when he was an entry-level data scientist. So as a senior data scientist, he had a lot of success applying through traditional job boards, right? He'd put in an application, people would recognize who he was, he would go through the process, and he would be able to land an interview and potentially a job. With the entry-level applications, he had virtually no success with that. There's a company called Sharpest Minds. They do data science mentorship. They collected a lot of data on this. And you're looking at interview or like job hit rate, like landing a data science job at around 2% of the companies you'd apply to. So if you apply to 100 companies, you're looking at 2 job offers, right? For like the average candidate.
Wait, hold on. You got to run that back. What was that metric? Did you say 100 and then you said 2?
So yeah, so 2% success rate on job applications, right? It's very, very low. I mean, that's for the average candidate. So some people are seeing 5 to 10%. Some people are seeing less than 2. But they're applying to a lot of jobs. What they also found is that the interview success rate, so actually in the interview, went up dramatically. We're talking like 3-4x when you're applying and like cold emailing. That is one of the most effective ways, whether it's on LinkedIn, you send a message, whether it's finding someone who is a relevant stakeholder in the company. The hiring manager is usually the person to talk to when you're reaching out more directly. And there's a correct way and an incorrect way to do this. If you're like, hey, give me a job, probably not going to have a lot of success. When you're reaching out with something tangible that shows proof of work, let's say you built a really slick web app based on one of your projects, and you send it to them and say, hey, this is something I built. Like, I love your company. I would love to explore how I could build something like this for your team, or something along those lines. Like that is an incredible conversation starter, right? You're not just
Mm-hmm.
asking something from that other person. What you're doing is conveying value, that you've created something they might think is cool. And then
Yep.
you're also, in addition, planting the seed that you could do that for their company as well. And there's plenty of really good blog posts on how to do this precisely. I have a whole podcast related to this uh, on my podcast channel as well. But Spark Notes, it's the channel at which you reach out is really important based on the stage that you're at. So entry
Mm-hmm.
level, you want to send a lot more direct communication. Senior level, you have a lot more options, and like that's just kind of the nature of the game and how it's played. The second thing I really always recommend is to build your portfolio, is to show your work. There's actually a really good book. It's called Show Your Work. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about data science or anything, but it just talks about how the power of putting your content out there. And it's not saying, hey, this is how great I am. Look at this really cool project. It's
Yeah.
saying that you're just like all social media should be, in my mind. You're sharing your progress. You're sharing your story. You're sharing the things that went well. You're sharing the things that didn't go well. And people love the story. They don't want to hear people
Mm-hmm.
bragging from the rooftops about their accomplishments. They want to hear what's real. They get invested
Right.
in the story. You think of a lot of the great YouTubers, the vloggers, whoever it is, you don't watch them because you're getting advice necessarily. You watch them because you're interested in what they're doing every day. You're interested in their thought process. You're interested in hearing about this journey. Hopefully I do this on my YouTube channel. I will never claim to be like an expert. My goal
You
is to
definitely do.
say, hey, these are the experiences that I've had, and this
Yeah.
is hopefully what I've learned and what someone else can learn as well. So putting your content out there, you eventually start to grow a brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
People
Yep.
know to go to your mediums to be able to see this type of work. And eventually, once you reach a critical mass, the the paradigm flips. So rather than me applying to companies, in a sense, the companies start reaching out to you. The
Yep.
way I look at it, I've accumulated a really strong brand on LinkedIn, and I have a lot of companies that reach out to me, and they're effectively applying to me for these job positions, right? They're saying we have this great opening. We think you'd be a really good fit. Why don't you come in and we'll talk about it? And I'm not planning on leaving my job anytime soon, but there is this point where if you put enough stuff out there, you're creating enough value for other people that
Mm-hmm.
this incredible kind of like gravitational uh, like force starts to form around the things that you create. I like
Right.
gravity because it's like, hey, the larger mass you have, so the larger mass of content that is useful, just like planets, the bigger the planet, the bigger the pull it has, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's difficult to get to that size, but it doesn't mean that. But that's not a journey that ever stops. Like if you're continually adding little things to this GitHub portfolio, this Kaggle profile, this LinkedIn presence, this blog, whatever it is, you eventually reach that size, and it helps you not just today, not just landing this job, but for the rest of your career in its entirety. Assuming you're not putting stupid stuff out there that'll get
Yeah.
you canceled or anything along those lines. So, um, to me, that's something that uh, it's like a marathon, not a sprint type of thing. But once you
Definitely.
start doing it, and once you start seeing the power of it, I mean, me just starting to do that with YouTube. Like I started YouTube because I saw that there were some challenges that I faced breaking into the
Mm-hmm.
field, and I wanted to share my experience because I didn't see any resources about, oh, I came from business. How do I break into data science? Like, how do I learn the technical skills? Where do those come from? And I just said, oh, I'll just make the video I wish I had, right? I'm sure someone was
Yeah.
interested in that, right? Just by putting those things out there, um, you start to see the power and momentum that you create, and you can ride that momentum into a new career. For me,
Mm-hmm.
the content stuff, it's not my full-time job, but it is in a sense a little bit of a business now, right? I like do earn some residual income and those types of things. Like in
And
theory,
leverage.
yeah, exactly. In theory, it can become anything I want it to be. uh, the
Yeah.
last part about building a portfolio is that you have a reason to talk to people, or people don't
Mm-hmm.
just write you off when you reach out to them. If they go in and let's say I want to reach out to someone on LinkedIn, and I've commented on 3 or 4 of their posts, they've seen a lot of the work that I'm posting and sharing on LinkedIn. The odds of that person responding to me is unbelievably higher. like even more so now that I have a podcast, I say, oh, I want to talk to you about the podcast. Like that is a proof of concept, right? That is like, oh,
Yep.
this person has interviewed these other guests that are hopefully like uh, influential in the field. Like there's no there's like significantly less fear of talking to this person that they'd waste my time, since
Right.
he's talked to all these other people that are relevant. And figuring out how you can build those blocks and stack them on top of each other, to me is like one of the keys to career success and building that over time. So again, long story
Yeah.
short, build. Don't think of it as like a, hey, I have to land this job. Think of it as, the more I can build this portfolio, this brand for myself, the more success and longevity that I can build in the long term, for my entire career, not just starting today.
Yeah. And man, I'm glad you did that, because, and I hope everybody takes that in the chat, because in today's day and age, skills are important. However, they need to be wrapped in a like a present. For example, you talked about branding. You talked about learning or really understanding. I'm going to use the word networking, but to unpack that, what's in there is understanding the direction I want to go. So if I want to work at Facebook, Netflix, XY, a FANG company, whatever, I need to know what the people who have the ability to potentially hire me, what those people are, what those people value on their team. If I don't know, most people, this is just how we're taught, right? We're taught to, talk, like, go build your network, go talk to people. But you don't necessarily know how to talk to the people that you're inboxing. And we all know those LinkedIn messages that we get in the conversation of, hey, can I pick your brain? Like, that's exactly what, Ken is saying. Like, that is not how you do that. You have to know what the person on the other side of the screen is going to find of value. And you do that through time and research. Like, for example, like, I think actually we're going to go back into the 10 or the 2 out of 100. The people that I mentor, and obviously we're in the same sort of industry. We're just on different sides. But the interviewing for, or the sending in applications for 100 companies versus knowing you want to work for these 3 companies, knowing all the people that work in the position that you want to have at those 3 companies, knowing what the resume looks like, knowing the language that they use on their resume, the projects that they have in their portfolio, because they are proof of concept of where you would like to go. And that is information you use to arbitrage and build out your own portfolio, so that when you talk to these people, you're already looking in good shape, because the people who are in the seats that you want to be in got in because they looked a certain way. And you're basically building your brand based on where you would like to go. That is a whole bunch of stuff that isn't necessarily really talked about, but you have to dress things up. You have to dress your skills up in that manner, and knowing that it's not just, hey, I learned data science. Yes, it's great to get those skills and be able to get those skills presented to you in a way that you can learn quickly, but then you got to learn the other stuff to be able to make it so that you're marketable. So I'm glad. I hope everybody caught that. That was like, I wish I had a soundboard on here, because that was like the gold of this.
I'm sure
this
there'll be a
episode.
recording at the very least, right?
Yes, there's definitely a recording. We're gonna put it in there. But okay, real quick, because I haven't said this entire session. If you guys have questions for Ken, we still have about a couple minutes before we jump into Q&A, but definitely start loading them up in the chat so I don't stutter and or my dyslexia hits me and I start reading things wrong. So just make sure that if you've got questions, copy and paste them in there. Let's talk about your 66 days of data. What is it and why is it important?
So the 66 days of data is something that's really special to me. I'm a big believer in creating good habits. So this larger concept is that the data science domain is always evolving, right? I think it is impossible for anyone to learn or understand all of the concepts at all points in time within this domain. Like, you don't just learn data science. It is a continuous process. So rather than focusing on learning chunks of it, like, oh, I've learned all these algorithms, I've learned this, I've learned that, I thought it made a lot more sense to create good data science habits for daily learning. So you're
Yeah.
continually picking little pieces of it and you're continually growing rather than trying to focus on this end goal. And for me, that has led to a lot more success. I think that you'll have a really long and consistent career if you can figure out a way to learn every day something new about this domain. As I had mentioned, it is always evolving, it's always growing, there's new things to learn. If you build that into a
Yeah.
routine, if you make it a ritual, that's a very powerful thing. At a high level, what the 66 days of data is you learn data science or some concepts for at least 5 minutes every day for 66 days. And you share what you've learned on your favorite social media platform. And this does a couple things. One, it gets you in the habit of sharing your work, something and like building a portfolio, something I described was very important earlier. Uh, but it also creates accountability, right? You're part of these communities. Other people are seeing you do this. You're more likely to stick with this if there is a little bit of social pressure to continue to do so. And the last thing, which
Yeah.
I think is really important and unique, is that after 66 days, or people, there's someone who's still doing it for like a full year. They're on their 370th day of data, which I think is incredible. You can look
That's
back at
insane.
all the progress that you've made, right? To me, we forget how much we've learned. We forget how far we've come constantly. And that little reminder is unbelievably motivating. The reminder that, wow, 66 days ago, I didn't know any of these concepts. And now I have some concrete understanding of these different things. It's a story to yourself about how far you've come. And to me, that's one of the most important things for getting past imposter syndrome, for wanting to continue going forward. And yeah, the 66 days of data, it's available to anyone. You just have to use the hashtag and you'll be part of it. I do a lot of giveaways, whether it's free certificates, like Udemy credits, uh, access to platforms, whatever it might be. That actually we just gave away two ZBook Studios, the same laptop that I use here, to two members of the community after this third round just ended. So it isn't just like, hey, I can I can learn. We're also providing some incredible resources as well and helping enable people to become the data scientists or machine learning engineers or data engineers of the future.
I dig it, man. So I'm not sure if you told obviously it's on your YouTube channel, but we'll have to link that. If you guys, Springboard team, if you guys are actually on Ken's, I know you guys are in the back end there. If you guys can link that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, you're
In the
welcome to
chat.
tag me in the title of the live too. That's a fun way to pump the algorithm a
Oh.
little bit. You can at Ken.
Secrets. I had no idea you could do that. I mean, I knew that
Oh
you could
yeah.
do that on Instagram. Had no idea that we could do that on YouTube. The more you know. Um, all right. So we have a couple good questions here. They're really all portfolio related. I did want to kind of squeeze this in before we kind of get into Q&A segment.
For sure.
I know you said you learned. Man, podcasts are beautiful. We talked about this when we were, talking one-on-one. But what is the biggest thing? Well, first off, the podcast is basically what it does passively is you're talking with people from the same world, but also different worlds at the same time. And what would you recommend? I'm not saying to tell everybody to start their own podcast, but what can people do to kind of get the benefit that you're kind of getting from the podcast, meeting all these people? And two, what are some of the coolest things that you have learned from talking and networking with this amount of people in such a short amount of time?
Yeah. Well, so for me, one of the first things with the podcast is that I started it mainly because there's limitations to my experience and my knowledge, right? If I talk to other people who've had different experiences, even within this domain, I can help create a more complete understanding of a lot of the issues and challenges and things that have also worked to break into the domain or have success in someone's career, whatever it might be. So in my mind, it's doing the proper research to be able to tell the stories that I tell or to potentially give advice or to share my stories with additional context. right? So rather than me just saying, hey, this is what I've learned, this is what you should do, I'm able to say, hey, these are what other people have experienced. This is their story. And here's 10 different scenarios where people have acted differently. You can essentially feel out which one is the most similar to your story, and you can go from there and take all of those. You see all the different scenarios play out and see how it worked out for other people, and you can try something yourself, right? So the
Yeah.
diversity of thought for me is really important. I also think having meaningful conversations with people who are in a similar domain is something that we don't do enough. Understanding, to me, I always thought that I was like, oh, most people must get into data science because they're fascinated with a project, right? Or
Yeah.
they have a burning question they want to answer. I've talked to probably 4 or 5, uh, like generally they tend towards going for their PhD, but they just love the algorithms, right? They love the math. Like math was always intuitive for them, and they just followed math, right? Complete opposite direction of what I went. Like I am okay with math. I don't love it, but it was a tool that enabled me. They were looking at it from the complete opposite perspective. And
Yeah.
so I think the more we talk with people in this domain, the more we listen to the stories that they have, the better that we get at understanding ourselves, because we're constantly reflecting and reevaluating and using those case stories as sort of a mirror to say, hey, they did this, would I do the same thing, would that change? And so not everyone has to start a podcast, but I mean, people can listen to my podcast. There's plenty of other great podcasts. There's in this domain. There's Artists of Data Science. Mine is Ken's Nearest Neighbors for those that are interested. There's Towards Data Science. There's Women in Data. There's a lot of incredible resources out there. Again, if you don't like the sound of my voice and hearing me interview people, probably not going to like my podcast. But if you do, if you do, then it could be a good one for you, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think with building a portfolio with any of these things, it's about accumulating a lot of information and knowledge and resources and projects and
And
learning
proof.
from those continually. Yeah, the proof.
Yeah.
And then when I found that when I build these things up, I like start to digest it, right? Because it's present. I have it somewhere. It's in a repo. It's on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Spotify, wherever it is. And that's a constant reminder of the things that I've built and the things that I want to continue to build. Right? Looking at a GitHub repo that you work on every day should be a constant reminder that you want to work in this field. It should be a constant reminder that that you're learning and growing, and you want to continue to adapt to the market, or you want to do a certain amount of work. Um, I will say there's one last concept that I really wanted to touch on, and it's
Yeah, for
how
sure.
like weirdly imbalanced the equation of landing a job is, right? So we want to land a job, uh, but we really only want one job, right? Like our goal isn't to land every job of uh, the 50 companies that we applied to,
Right.
right? Like, and the resume that would optimize the highest probability in each individual job, like as an
Yep.
aggregate, probably wouldn't be the one that optimized the highest probability of landing a few jobs that you really wanted. And so thinking about that, it's like when we apply, what should we optimize for? Should we give the
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote best resume across the board to give us maybe a 4% chance at landing a job at every one of those places? Or do we send out a resume that gives us like a 20% chance at 3 or 4 places, but probably wouldn't be relevant to the other places? Obviously, like
Yeah.
if you're doing that, it probably takes significantly more time to put those for those 4 places. So you don't necessarily want to like, you probably wouldn't want to go all in with doing that for all of the 50 places. But the idea is that we can customize our resume, we can cater the messaging, we can do specific projects that are relevant to domains we're interested in to
Mm-hmm.
increase our chances of landing a couple jobs rather than only focusing on like raising the level of all of our interviews across the board, right? Because
Yeah.
when I was applying to jobs a long time ago, of the 50, 100, 200 jobs that I applied to, I probably only wanted to work at like 20 of those places, right? Why wouldn't I have just spent a little extra time or modified my portfolio or resume to focus on those 20 and gave myself
Yeah.
the best possible opportunity? If we're talking about long-term utility, it almost makes more sense to do that because, like if we're talking about time as a function of money, as a function of happiness as well, you're probably going to be better off spending additional time to work in a company that you want to work at and having more touch points with them and getting to know them and doing more informational interviews. Um, so I think that's something that ties really well all together with the portfolio and with even the podcast. Like I interview people that I want to talk to, and those people that I want to
Yep.
talk to can probably connect me with more people that I want to talk to. Right? You should be talking to companies a lot that you want to work at. That's how I got my internship at DraftKings. I used their product. I looked on their job board. They didn't have any jobs for me. They had an undergrad internship. I emailed them. I said, I'm a grad student. I'd love to have a graduate internship if you have it available. We talked and they made a position for me. Right? To me, that like you never know unless you ask, right? You never
Yep.
would know to
Yes.
ask if you didn't have a relationship with the company. I never would have known to reach out or gone that extra step if I didn't really care about working there.
Man, that's major key. When it comes to portfolios, like people think it's the work that is going to hold them up. But if you're applying to, I'm just regurgitating what you're saying. But if you're going out and planning on applying to 100 companies and you have a generic portfolio, your portfolio is basically what you created through your practice of understanding the skill set. And you put no forethought into thinking, what are the people who I am trying to talk to going to think when they see my portfolio? Are they just going to be like they have the skills, or because in their mind they're like someone's yelling at them, hey, Tom or Sally or whomever, you got to hire somebody in X amount of days because we're growing the team or we're on fire. Regardless, there's a problem that they need to solve, and you're gonna exactly what you said. You have to know what they're dealing with, and what exactly that you can provide to them. And basically, the more tailored your portfolio is, the better. Someone in the chat said exactly what you said. Like you have to know, and we've been saying this throughout the entire conversation. You have to know what the team wants that you want to be hired on is looking for, so that you can put that in your portfolio. So when you're pitching yourself to them in the interview, we probably both we use different language, but we're literally saying the same thing.
Well,
You have
something
to
that really
go ahead.
really sticks out to me is that just make it every interaction with someone else as easy for them as possible, right?
Yes.
Whether when I'm
Yes.
like asking someone to come on a podcast, I use a Calendly link. I say, hey, just choose a time that works for you, right?
Yep.
When you're applying for a job, you say, hey, I know that your company is facing these types of problems. This is called the briefcase method. And you go in with maybe like an 8x11 piece of paper that has, here, these are the main problems I think you're facing. These are how I would create data science solutions with them, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to say, hey, this person isn't thinking about our company specifically. They if one of the solutions is good, most of them probably won't be. Like, oh, this person has already created value for us before even hiring them. What could they do if we actually hired them? Right?
Yep.
Just the taking away the friction from interviewing, taking away the friction from initial reach out, taking away the friction from all of these is, in my mind, one of the keys. And you do that again by creating this portfolio, is by like reaching out in proper channels, and by like creating this cascade of positive forces for you.
Yeah. You want to be a CIA agent. That's how I think about it. You want to know what the company wants, what are they building, so that you can get all your ducks in a row, come in with that briefcase and be like, listen, I've been looking around, I know the answers, this is what I got for you. And you just jump to the front of the line. Like, in my opinion, I think resumes, this might be like a hot take, but the traditional way of sending in or applying is like, you're going to be shot down by the person who does exactly what you're talking about, the briefcase. They're jumping to the front of the line, they did their homework, and they're going to win. So everybody who's listening, like, definitely watch this session over and over again. And there's a lot of things here to break down. But let's see.
Yeah.
We do have
one last thing is that
yeah,
if you reframe the data science interview process, right?
yeah,
It's, let's say there's 100 people applying for this position. In theory, if you're applying for that position as well, all of you are competing for like essentially like $120,000 prize. Let's say you land the job, right? What would you do that was within the rules to make sure you got that $120,000 prize? Right? Would you talk to more people? Would you create a briefcase approach? Would you build a portfolio? What would you do? Right? Like if we reframe it in that sense, I mean, like, yes, you have to do work to get that money as well, like once you're on the
Yes.
job. But if you think about it that way, like, okay, what would I do that would give me 100% the best chance to land this job, get this money, do whatever it is? I also I always put my foot in my mouth when I use this example because I don't think you should get into this domain for the money, because you'll burn out really quick. But if you reframe it in that sense, like, I watched Squid Game recently, and it's like, oh, like,
Yeah.
what is within the rules that'll put you ahead, that'll get you noticed? Like, there's plenty of things you can do as long as it's different from the other candidates. Like, you really got to be thinking about, okay, what is unorthodox? What could impress this particular employer? I know a project focused on their specific line of work would probably open some eyes, or focusing on a specific problem that they have. Come on, like, you make it so easy for them, right? Like
Yeah.
if everyone else has generic projects and you have one that is specifically focused on, like, I don't know, like, let's say it's like agriculture in fruit trees with this company that you're applying to that owns a bunch of farms. Like, how could they not look at you differently than the other candidates?
Yeah, there's no way not to, and to not, because that is the easiest way. And I really hope that everybody is listening. You guys are like the beginner catalysts of stopping the applying to 100, companies, and really spend time on the very handful of, companies that you do want to go to, and do that research that Ken has really just dropped. Again, rewatch because there's a lot of portfolio questions here, and he's literally answered them. There is no perfect project other than the people that had the potential to hire you. What are they looking for? That answers the question of what your portfolio project should be. This is how an inventor thinks. There is a problem. I need to solve that problem. It's the same line of thinking. All right, so we got 5 minutes here. We have Joanne is asking, let me see. Actually, I think this is a more proper question. How do you keep up with the industry? What are your go-tos? How do you continue to educate yourself?
So I read a lot. It depends. So, like, I really like some towards data science articles. Some of them are like super generic and kind of lame. I mean, it's the nature of the publication, right? KD Nuggets is pretty good. A lot of the research that comes out, I try to keep up with. I really like 2-minute papers. They do a great job on YouTube. I also follow quite a few people on Twitter and LinkedIn that I find to have really good information when they share it. To me, like, curating a Twitter feed or curating Instagram or curating a LinkedIn profile so that you're only getting information that's relevant to you is like a really powerful thing to do. I think social media is evil, but if you harness its power for yourself, you can you can make it a very powerful and educational tool. So, like, start a new Twitter account and only follow people that are talking about AI news, that are, like, that's one way to make that platform work for you and work really well.
Just like things on TikTok that have to do with data science and NFTs, guys. The algorithm will do it for you. I don't know how you feel about that, but
out here, data science.
Yes, data science. All right, let me get another question here. Hold on, let me see. Okay, so this one is actually about your personal half and half life. How do you start and continue a data science and data engineering YouTube? How do you prevent burnout in the process? Basically, how are you balancing your full-time and your content?
So I think
you're learning in education. There's a lot in that content. You're literally learning to teach other people. Yeah.
Oh, to me, that's a framing thing, right? Is if my work isn't going well, I'm like, wow, at least I have content. I'm going to focus on that. If my content's
Yeah.
not going well, I say, oh, at least I have this job. I can put a lot of effort into that, or I have these other outlets, right? And
Hmm.
so to me, yeah, I'd like to make more tutorial videos. I'd like to do more coding on my channel, but I do a lot of that for work, and it feels like I'm doing double work when I do those, right? And so I've made or tried to make content that I feel is like it doesn't feel like work to me, right?
Yeah.
And although that might hurt me in the long run in terms of what people want to see, I also feel like that's sustainable for me. And finding that middle ground is what's really important. I also feel like if I didn't do my normal job, there's like a little bit like less credibility that I have in the domain. I'd also probably make less optimal like financial decisions if all of my income was coming from content creation, right? I might take sponsorships that I didn't necessarily believe in. I might
Yep.
like like make decisions that I think could. I don't think I'd do anything that would like harm the followers that I have, but I also don't. I might make decisions that I thought were like um, that were like a little bit more in a gray area, right? And to me, that's something I really take pride in is that every sponsor I work with, everything I do, it's not because I need it. It's because I feel like, hey, well, like a little extra money never hurts. But also, every company that I work with, they either have free features or I believe it's a really good product and they're willing to give back to the community in really powerful ways. And also, it's I don't work with companies that I don't necessarily believe in. So I think that there's a lot of keeping myself in check by
Yeah.
having both of those sides of my brain, or like my
Got it.
two business sides.
Word, man. And this is the last question from me. Would you recommend that other people build their brands? Because you not only have a skill set, you not only know how to network and be able to get your foot in the door, but the leverage that comes with having like a brand name, and that's just going to continue growing with you. Would you recommend that people do that, or in their own way, rather than just focusing on skill set, kind of making sure that they're showing their work? Actually, you know what? I think we've answered that question through this entire conversation. Um, Honestly, we're gonna leave it at that.
Yes.
The answer is yes. Brand yourself, guys. We don't need to answer that, but Ken, we are at 4 p.m. ET, and man, it's been a pleasure. I want to thank you guys in the chat for coming out and asking good questions, and I hope you guys rewatch this conversation. We'll be slicing and dicing this segment up so you guys can watch the clips here on the Springboard channel. But other than that, Ken, it's been a pleasure. We're going to close out, but I want to say thank you so much. And not only I appreciate you, but the chat appreciates you as well, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a blast today. Um, Definitely, if you're interested in more content storytelling stuff, feel free to check out my YouTube or the podcast Ken's Nearest Neighbors, also on YouTube.
Yes, sir. The links are down below if you guys want to follow Ken, so check it out and see him there in a few. All right, Ken, we'll check you later. I'm going to close out. I'll see you in a few. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching episode 2 of Real Talk with Ken G. If you guys are looking for an amazing course to get started in data science, check out Springboard. If you guys want $1,000 off of the data science bootcamp, check the link down in the description. You use that promo code to get $1,000 off and continue watching these amazing episodes that we have here on our YouTube and hang out more with us. All right, guys, thank you so much. I want to appreciate all of you guys in the chat, and we'll smell you later. All right, guys, Brandon Gross, your host, is out, and stay awesome. Peace.